your word. Show us what you'd have us to learn, how we can apply that to our life. Though this is written to the nation of Israel thousands of years ago, but is still applicable and we can still apply it to our lives today. I ask that you'd help us to see ways that we can do that tonight. In Christ's name, amen. All right, so who can tell me where we were last week and what happened last week? Okay, yes, Saul was chosen king. Is there something over here? Did I hear Casey?
Yeah, Casey said.
All right, what else happened in chapter number 10? He tried not to be king. He tried to hide, right? When they're going through, they have all the tribes together, all the clans together, and they get to his and they say, hey, wait, is this guy here? And where is he hiding?
In the baggage.
Yeah, behind all the supplies, all the luggage. And hiding so well that they have to go back to the Lord and say, wait a second, is this guy here? And of course, God says, yeah, he's right there. And they're able to find him, right? And then what do we see that's kind of interesting at the end, though? So it kind of plays into chapter 11, what's going to happen towards the end of this chapter. What happens at the end of chapter number 10? What are the people's responses to him being king? Okay, yeah, that's part of it. That's one group. So you have one group who seems to be excited about it, right? Long live the king. They're excited. He looks like the king, right? He's tall. He's handsome. Mike's not here, but I'll say it. He's dark, right? That's according to Mike. He looks like a king. And so some are excited. They've got what they've asked for. Some are realizing that he's probably not the answer, right? Those mighty men, those men of valor, the men that probably form what is like the foundation of a standing army for the nation of Israel, realize that Saul is probably not the answer to all of their problems, but because he is the one that the Lord had chosen for that specific time and purpose, they are going to submit to that and follow him and support him in the work that he is doing. And then you have that third group who did what? You guys already said it. Despised him. And didn't want anything to do with him. Right? I don't think it was mainly because of his character flaws. It was probably because he wasn't like the all-powerful kings of the other nations around him, that he couldn't just do whatever he wanted, so they weren't going to get any of their benefits out of it. Right? And so we see those that are despising him, don't acknowledge him as king, aren't willing to affirm that. So the nation now seems to be kind of what? Split, divided, right? And in fact, when you go through the period of Judges and all the time leading up to here, the one thing that we don't really see about the nation of Israel is that it's very united, right? You can read through portions of Judges where there's some tribes kind of rising against others. There's some not going out to battle with the rest of the tribes because they just don't want to be bothered, right? That there's not much unity within what we would call the nation of Israel. And I'm not even sure you could really just call it a whole nation at that point. There are a bunch of individual tribes and clans that are kind of trying to come together to be one. Now, God does raise up judges, of course, that judge the nation of Israel and try to bring some kind of unity under God, but they are very much so kind of tribal and territorial, and even leading into this section. You know, they've at least acknowledged Samuel as a king, as a leader, not as a king, but as a leader. They've looked to him and they've had peace for a while. Now, of course, they want this king. And so Saul's inheriting something that's not exactly in a healthy place. It's not exactly united. They're still kind of divided. There's some uncertainty about what having a king means to some people and whether or not that's really going to solve anything. There's some that are probably wishing, man, I wish we wouldn't have done this. But then thankfully, I guess, in some ways for Saul, this happens. Look at verse number 11, or chapter number 11. We're going to begin in verse number 1. It says, Then Nahash, the Ammonite, went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. And all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, Make a treaty with us, and we will serve you. But Nahash the Ammonite said to them, On this condition I will make a treaty with you, that I gouge out all your right eyes, and thus bring disgrace on all Israel. Then the elders of Jabesh said to him, "Give us 7 days respite, that we may send messengers through all the territory of Israel. Then if there is no one to save us, we will give ourselves up to you." Very interesting scene, right? And a lot of interesting things kind of already happening in this first portion. First off, we're introduced to Nahash, who's an Ammonite king. And who are the Ammonites? Who anybody know who the Ammonites are? I have to go all the way back to Genesis to find that out. Genesis chapter number 19, beginning in verse number 36, says, "Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites." So, the Ammonite nation, the Ammonite people, whatever you want to call them, are descendants of Lot from his incestuous relationship with one of his daughters. All right, so they have descended. They're actually given a portion of land by God for them to settle in. And when the nation of Israel is about to enter the promised land, God specifically told them to leave the Ammonites alone. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 17, we pick up, it says, "The Lord said to me, today you are to cross the border of Moab at Ar, and when you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them. For I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot for a possession." The nation of Israel is really not supposed to mess with them or have anything to do with them and allow them to live there. And hopefully the Ammonites are pretty peaceful with them, won't attack the nation of Israel, will respect them. If God has given them a portion and a lot, hopefully they will, understand and repay that and not attack the nation of Israel as the covenant people of God. However, that's not exactly what happens, right? God always seems to make things very clear for us. We always seem to muddy it up, right? What God makes great, we have a very good way of destroying and defiling. Think about mankind. Man was made perfect. Man defiled it, right? We have a very good way of doing that. But in Judges chapter 3, beginning in verse number 12, they align with Moab, and they end up attacking Israel. It says, "And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord." That probably played a little bit into it, right? Now, there's probably a little bit of judgment from God because they aren't doing what is right. And of course, we know that the nation of Israel has a constant problem with that. The book of Judges is like a roller coaster. They do great, and then they fall off the cliff. And then they start to do good, and then they fall off again, right? God has to send these nations to judge them. But it says, "And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He gathered to himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites and went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms." So the children of Ammon align with Moab, and they go and attack Israel, again as judgment. But later they cross the Jordan and attack Israel in several different areas. In Judges chapter 10 and verse number 9, the Ammonites crossed the Jordan to fight also against Judah and against Benjamin and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. So this is not something that's new for the children of Ammon, for the Ammonites. They seem to be a constant thorn in the side of Israel. They also go just a chapter later and try to lay claim to some area of land that Israel had occupied since they came into the promised land. In Judges 11, chapter 13, the king of the Ammonites answered the messengers of Jephthah, because Israel on coming up from Egypt took away my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok and to the Jordan. Now, therefore, restore it peaceably. So there's already this battle over some land, and this may or may not be exactly where they're talking about. But Jabesh does border them. And so now that they're going in again to fight and harass and hinder Israel. The Ammonites actually will continue to be a problem for the nation of Israel until David takes care of them in chapters 10 through 13 in 2 Samuel. So David is finally able to give them victory over it. But they weren't supposed to initially be a problem for Israel. They were supposed to live peaceably. They were supposed to have their own possession of land. They weren't supposed to threaten them. But we see them again threatening the nation of Israel here. And in fact, they're encamped around him. It says that they went up and they besieged Jabesh, that they had this military encampment around him. And they give the nation, or the people of Jabesh, kind of scare him and essentially try to give him an ultimatum. The way that the people of Jabesh answer is kind of interesting. They try to handle it on their own without going to the rest of the nation of Israel, maybe kind of seeing some of that division and that disunity between them, but they try to handle it on their own. And at the end of verse number 1, it says that they send people. They say to Nahash, make a treaty with us and we will serve you. So what would happen then is they would typically give some kind of monetary tribute or something to the king that was enslaving them, and they would end up having some kind of servitude agreement with the king, and they would pay a specific tax or whatever, and they would be able to live in relative peace while they're still serving this king. But they're willing basically to forsake their whole relationship with Israel just to save themselves. Right? They're willing to forsake everything with their heritage, everything else, and they're willing to serve this Gentile, this pagan nation, this wicked nation that's around them. But Nahash isn't exactly having it, is he? What does he tell them in verse number 2? What's his response to their, look, we're going to serve you? What's his response? He wants to cut out their right eyes. Now, why would he want to do that? Okay, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, have you ever tried to do something without one eye? Your depth perception's kind of off, right? I actually found out, so I was on a trip from Florida to Tennessee with my pastor growing up, and I, for some reason, never knew this growing up, but we found out as we were, traveling down the interstate at 70-some miles an hour that he could only see out of one eye. And I was like, oh, really? That's kind of interesting. He said, yeah, it kind of messes with your depth perception a little bit, but we're good. Oh, at 77 miles an hour, this is fantastic. You're a little close. But if you've ever lost sight out of one eye or hadn't been able to look out of one eye for a while, you realize kind of how much it messes you up. But see, what they would have been able to do, though, is still what? You can still do what with one eye? See, but you can still work. They still would have been able to do their work. They still would have been able to make money, still would have been able to pay this tribute, but they wouldn't have been able to fight well. Right? They wouldn't have been able to mount kind of really any physical attack against the Ammonites, and would have subdued them. But he also has a further purpose beyond just those practical things. What else does it say there in verse number 2 about it? Shame them. He wants to bring a disgrace on the whole nation of Israel by this one victory. Showing how powerful they are, showing how great they are, how weak and inferior the nation is. You guys have this new king, but look, we're still able just to come over here and do this. Right? They want to bring a reproach on the whole nation of Israel because they won't do this. This kind of tells us something about the Ammonites, right? They're pretty ruthless people. They're godless people. They're ruthless. They're very violent. So the response, what do you think the people of Jabesh are going to do? Sign me up for that, right? Look at verse 3. What do? They have a very interesting response. Okay. But what is that better option they seek? It's interesting. Read it again. Verse number 3. We'll read it again. It says, the elders of Jabesh said to him, this is Nahash, give us 7 days respite that we may send messengers through all the territory of Israel. Then if there's no one to save us, we will give ourselves up to you. What are they asking for? Help. But don't overthink it. Just in the most simple terms. They're asking for time to do what? No, not run. Yeah. They are literally asking this guy who's about to come in and take their whole territory and fight them and everything else. They're saying, yeah, look, you can do that. Just give us a few days, see if we can mount a kind of resistance, see if we can get an army together. And then if we can't, okay, come do your thing. What? That makes zero sense. And as much as it doesn't make sense for them to even ask that, it seems that Nahash agrees, right? Because what happens later on is verse number 4, we see we'll get into in a second, but it says the messengers came to Gibeah. They sent messengers out. So apparently Nahash agreed to do this. Why on earth would he do that? You have this city, this town, this people on the ropes. Easy, you can go in there, you can take them, you can cut out all their eyes. You know that there's really probably no way that they're going to do anything. Why on earth would he agree to this?
If you know that there's no unity in the nation, then it's futile and then you don't even have to fight.
Yeah. I think that's a very good possibility. That if he probably thinks there's probably nobody else that they can get to come help him anyways. So go ahead and try. It ain't going to do you any good. What was another reason we thought maybe?
Even if they do come, he's probably thinking he's better than Saul.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's probably some pride to him, right? Like, they couldn't even get an army that would rival us. We're so powerful. Okay, so that might be it.
The more people he conquers, the bigger king he is. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the more spoil they get. Back then, the more you conquer, the more spoil becomes yours. And the more prestige a king would get. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming if he was obviously eager to fight, and he felt confident that they were going to beat him. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think all those probably go into it. And I think maybe what he's kind of thinking is if all those things happen, I don't even know if they can get someone, right? If they do, we'll probably be able to beat them, but I'll still get all the splendor, all the spoil, and everything else. I think there's maybe even a third one. Maybe if I give them this time, because there is no unity, because they are just divided, they can't mount up this. We save a lot of bloodshed, right? I ain't even got to go to battle. They'll just surrender and it'll all be fine. Sure, have your 7 days. You know, there's power in unity, right? There's power in the unity of the nation of Israel, as we're going to see here in a moment. And there's power in unity of the church today. Jesus talks about it a little bit when he says, when they accuse him of having a demon, and he's like, why would I cast out a demon by being a demon? That would defeat the purpose, right? Like a house divided against itself cannot stand. We worry so much today about all these other things that may come in and destroy the church. We worry about someone coming in the back door and shouting heresy. We worry about people coming in and trying to split. You know what we don't really worry about? Division amongst us over stupid things. You know what Satan often uses in churches? Division over stupid things. Why? It's so much easier to get us fighting and arguing with each other. Because if we're fighting and we're arguing with each other, usually about the color of the carpet, the color of the drapes, if we put another TV up or not, or something that has zero to do with the ministry, if we're busy fighting over that, you know what we're not busy doing? Serving and sharing the gospel. Satan doesn't have to do all these big fancy tricks and try and get the church shut down in America. Satan doesn't have to try and shut down all these churches in America or make the Bible illegal or make it to the point where we can't share our faith, make us scared to. Why does he have to do all that when all he has to do is get us arguing about the color of the doors and it shuts us down? Because we could care less about unity. We just want to be right. We want it done our way, my way. You have to agree with me. And if you don't, we can have no fellowship and we're done. There are certain things in the Bible, absolutely. You attack the deity of Christ, I'm splitting. You say salvation, you can earn it? No. Say God doesn't exist in the Trinity? Splitting. You want to say we got to have 3 services on Sunday? I don't really care. You can if you want to. You say, oh, well, you have to wear this, you have to do this on Sunday, or you have to have services this way, you have to sing this specific music. Cool, that's what you want. It's not a primary issue. See, unity, there is power in unity. because we can look past some of these minor things, some of these things that aren't primary issues, and we can focus on why we're really here, which is to reach people with the gospel. And then disciple them once they get reached with the gospel, and see them grow, disciple other people, reach other people, and see this thing continue and continue and continue. But we get focused on everything else that causes disunity, right? So he's probably not even worried because there's not much unity. But we see something great because God does deliver his people, right? God always shows up. God is always there for his people when they need him. Look at verse number 4. It says, when the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul, they reported the matter in the ears of the people, and all the people wept aloud. So again, it seems Nahash has agreed to this. So they send messengers out and they go to Gibeah. Where was Gibeah? It says Gibeah of Saul, so that kind of gives you a little bit of a hint. But what is Gibeah? Gibeah of Saul. Kind of. It was his hometown, right? It's where Saul's from. It's where he's hanging out. He doesn't have a palace yet. He's not, set up a capital in Jerusalem or anything. He's very much so living like the judges did at the time, just going about his daily life and his daily business while the kingdom is still being set up. Remember, this is hot off the heels of him being installed as king. So, the kingdom is still being established and it's still new. So he's there. They send messengers there. And when they tell it and they tell the people what's going on, what do? They weep aloud. So much so, look at what verse 5 says. It says, now, behold, Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen. Saul said, what is wrong with the people that they are weeping? And then he gets told about the men of Jabesh. So much so that as he's coming back into the town, he hears them weeping and wailing, and it shows the level of despair that they have for this. When I was an officer, sometimes I had the terrible responsibility of having to make a death notification. And it doesn't really matter what you do, even in training. Nobody really prepares you for some of those. And one day I got a call from a detective in Florida who needed me to go to a house because they found this lady's son dead, and there was question at the time if there was foul play or if it was suicide. And he wanted them to call them. And that's it. That's the only thing I'm given. And so I have to go knock on the door and, is your son so-and-so? Does he live here? Yeah. I hate to inform you, but right? And I tell them. And I'll never forget their response. Absolute utter weeping. And crying. And just completely distraught. And then, of course, they start asking questions that I don't have answers to. You need to call so-and-so. You need to call this detective. You need to call this detective. When somebody truly weeps, right, you can tell the level of despair and heartache by how they are weeping. You can tell how much they're hurt. You can tell how much these men and women and the people here in Gibeah are just distraught because there's no hope. They have a king, right? They're like all the nations now. Remember part of why they wanted to install a king? What was it? Like all the other nations, but specifically to do what? To go out and fight their battles. And now all of a sudden, where's Saul? Is he going to do anything? I think some of them are realizing now, maybe our hope shouldn't have been found in a man. God always fought for us. It's funny, that's what he constantly reminds them of when he talks about the Exodus and other times, how he had constantly delivered them. God was supposed to be their source of security and salvation, not a man. And they are weeping because there's no hope for them. There's only despair. They're looking at the situation and thinking this is hopeless. What they forget is that even in spite of us, even in spite of some of our faithlessness and our doubt, that God will still and can still deliver his people, and he can use imperfect, fallible people to do so. And that's exactly what God is going to do. Look at verse number 6. It says, "And the Spirit of God rushed upon Saul when he heard these words, and his anger was greatly kindled." Now, whose anger was greatly kindled? I don't know. I think it's both. The Spirit of God, of course, we know in the Old Testament works a little different than the Spirit does now, right? That now if you trust in Christ, the Holy Spirit indwells you and takes up permanent residence within you in the believer. Wasn't that way in the Old Testament, barring one or two exceptions. But it wasn't that way then, that the Spirit of God would come on them for a specific task, a specific purpose, maybe a prophetic word. And so the Spirit of God is rushing upon Saul now, and he burns with what we may call like righteous indignation. Right? He's angry at the evil that is being perpetrated, that that this nation would come against the covenant people of God and try and destroy them, try and hurt them, try and harm them, the people of God. And there's anger about it because of the evilness, because of the brutality that's being threatened against them in their land. So Saul does something in verse number 7 that would probably definitely spur on a response. Look at verse 7. "He took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hand of the messenger, saying, 'Whoever does not come out after Saul and Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen.' Then the dread of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out as one man." There's finally unity, right? It's kind of sad. Sometimes it takes a tragedy for there to be unity. Again, think about September 12th, 2001. September 10th, there wasn't a whole lot of unity. September 11th, in the morning, there wasn't. September 12th, boy, there was unity. Sometimes it takes something tragic to jolt us into doing what we need to do. But Saul takes these oxen, cuts them up, and sends them out and says, "If you don't come, this is exactly what's going to happen to you." He finally steps up and at least provides some kind of leadership. Essentially what he's saying is join the fight with us, or you have no place in the covenant people of Israel. You must come out and defend your brother, your sister. You must take care of them. Saul's not messing around. This is a pretty tough message, which is interesting because he also includes somebody else that they're going to follow. Samuel. Why would he say, "If you don't come out after me," and Samuel? Why include Samuel? He's a prophet, yep. But what has Samuel been for the last several decades? He's been the only universally accepted leader. Saul is not universally accepted at this point by the nation of Israel, but Samuel is. And so he's saying, look, if you don't come out for me, if you won't listen to me, Samuel's right here with me, and he's going to do the exact same thing. We're requiring this of you. Samuel had credibility. He was a proven leader, and Saul is not at this point. Thankfully, this message seems to be received because after this goes out, remember the Holy Spirit is on Saul for this, and the fear of the Lord falls upon all of them, and it's probably something that piques their interest enough, or at least reminds them and gives them that jolt that this very thing could happen to us, right? That we need to come together as a nation. If we are going to be the covenant people of God, if we're going to be one chosen people, then we actually need to come together and stand together. Not worry about all these other little differences, but stand together and fight and repel what is coming. Look at verse number 8. It says, "When he mustered them at Bezek, the people of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. That's a lot of people in a short amount of time. You get 330,000 show up, at least they did that. Let's see, verse number 9. "And they said to the messengers who had come, 'Thus shall you say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, you shall have salvation. And when the messengers came and told the men of Jabesh, they were glad. I think we all probably would be. You're threatening to cut out my right eye and take me, and we're not even entirely sure you're going to, form a military and come help us. We're not sure that that's going to happen. And then they finally receive word that, hey, salvation is coming. We are going to come help you. We got 330,000. I'd be rejoicing too. And look at their response to Nahash. This I find this hilarious. Remember, they are in despair, that they are down, that there's no hope, they're hopeless. But this is their response to Nahash when they hear this. Verse 10, therefore the men of Jabesh said, this is to Nahash now, the Ammonites, tomorrow we will give ourselves up to you, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you. We tried, I guess it's not going to happen. So yeah, just come on in. Just come on, come take us. I'm not even entirely sure that they think the nation of Israel is actually going to save them. Can these men even fight? We don't know. But they're confident that they're going to be delivered. They're confident that standing together they will. They're confident because God is able to deliver them. That's where their confidence should be. That God is able to deliver them out of this hand of these people. Nahash seems to be pretty confident that he can take them. He seems to be fairly confident in what's going to happen. Look at verse number 11. And the next day, Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the camp in the morning watch and struck down the Ammonites until the heat of the day. And those who survived were scattered, as that no 2 of them were left together. Now, this is still actually a tactic that's really still used by military and law enforcement alike. You go in the dead of night, in the early morning before dawn, and you go in and attack, and yeah, you got pretty good success because you catch them off guard. But Nahash seems fairly confident, and God gives Israel a tremendous victory. He's delivered them from another people. This time he's using the man that he's appointed as their leader, that he's anointed as their leader, and Saul to lead them, to kind of unite this nation, and he gives them a tremendous victory. Question is going to be, do they recognize who gives them the victory? You see, because we go on to see that God desires his people to remember him rather than focus on our earthly leaders. Look at verse number 12. And the people said to Samuel, who is it that said, Saul shall reign over us? Oh, who is it that said, shall Saul reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. That's a pretty strong statement. The nation of Israel now has had this tremendous victory, right? They've fought back the Ammonites, who probably were militarily superior to them. They've had this victory, and this has now done what in the nation of Israel? Done what for Saul to the nation of Israel? Yeah, it's affirmed him being the king, right? That he is able to lead us. He is able to be a military leader to fight our battles. We can follow this man. It affirms his leadership. So much so that the people seem to have this infatuation, this obsession with Saul, to the point that, you know what? Those that even opposed him, they can't even stay with us anymore. They can't be left alive. Bring them here so we can put them to death. Let alone, let's just see if we can change their minds now. But let's just go ahead and put them to death. They thought that their victory was really coming from Saul and not from God. They don't recognize who has actually given them victory. Look at verse number 13. Saul, of all people, like if you ever have that friend in the group and they're the voice of reason, you're like, uh-oh. Like we've really gone down the rabbit hole here. We had someone like that when I was in the military, and he was always the crazy one coming up with crazy ideas, and we got this idea we were going to go down to Seoul, do something stupid. I don't remember. I was 19. And he was like, I don't think that's a great idea. We all kind of stopped. Like, if you're saying that, it's probably a terrible idea. Well, that's kind of where Saul is here, verse number 13. But Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day, for today the Lord has worked salvation in Israel. Even Saul is able to acknowledge that it wasn't him that did this. And I think it's probably because he may still have the Spirit of God on him. It's not clear at this point if it's been removed or not, but it came on him for this specific act. But he's able to recognize that it wasn't him that was able to do it. It wasn't him that was able to win this victory, but it was only God. Now, in some ways, this seems to kind of invalidate that Saul may not be a good leader, or that Saul may not be a very spiritual leader. One instance, one flash in the pan doesn't exactly erase what we actually know about Saul and his character and what will actually happen in chapter number 12 that we'll see, not next week, week after. That, Samuel still has his doubts about Saul, even though this happens. Some people can speak some truth and do some things right occasionally. I actually heard a pastor, they had some ladies groups that were using some studies written by a lady that maybe some of you have read that I would wholeheartedly disagree with a lot of what she has said. Considers herself to be a pastor, which is a problem there. But he said, she found her way. When I found out that they were reading some of her stuff and talking about it and starting to learn and agree, he said, I started to use her in a negative way in examples in my sermons as my way of shepherding them away from her. He said, I have no doubt that at some point in her life she has said something that is true, but that doesn't make her teaching good. And that is true. I have no doubt in my mind that Joel Osteen at some point in his life has said something that's true. That's not a man I'm going to go sit under to learn about sin or God or salvation. Right? Just because someone says something good occasionally does not mean that they are not a false teacher. It does not mean that they are godly. I think Saul has this reaction probably because the Spirit of the Lord is still on him, recognizing what God has done for them. But I'm glad he at least points them back and tries to get them back to see that it wasn't me that gave you this victory, but it was indeed God, and we could not have done it without God. Now look at verse number 14. In the last two verses it says, Then Samuel said to the people, Come, let us go to Gilgal, and there renew the kingdom. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they sacrificed peace offerings before the Lord. And there Saul and the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. They go back. They have this ceremony that affirms him as king. The nation seems to be united around this. Now, we don't know if it's the whole nation or just the leaders of the nation, but either way, they seem to be united around Saul as a leader now. And this appears to be good on the outside. It appears, hey, this is great. We're kind of united. Maybe things can go forward. But what is clear through this, and as again, like I said, we'll see in chapter 12, Israel's looking to Saul as their savior and their source of security and not the Lord. That they think that this earthly king that they have set up to be like all the other nations, to go out and fight their battles, is going to be what saves them. And yet God has already reminded them, and so has Samuel, you only have this king because you've rejected God. God fought for them. God protected them because he was faithful to them despite their unfaithfulness. That they were his covenant people, and he wasn't going to allow something like that to happen, but he was still good to his covenant people. God alone is their security and their salvation. Today, God and Jesus Christ alone are our security and salvation. That is who we find our identity in. That is who we find our joy in. That is who we find our safety in. That's who we find our hope in. We don't put our hope in these outward materialistic things. We don't put our hope in some teacher, some preacher. We don't put our hope in even the church. We should put our hope in Jesus Christ. He is the source of our security. He is the source of salvation. Victory only comes from the Lord. Though he may use earthly vessels to communicate that, though he may use earthly vessels to maybe even do great things for the Lord here, it has little to do with those earthly vessels and far more to do with the God that they serve. That God is the one that works all things together for his good. We ought to be thankful that he allows us to be part of it. That he would allow us to have any form of ministry. That he would allow us to have anything. Oh, man. I was reading a book. It was called Pastor's Justification. It's for pastors. It's by Jared Wilson. There's a lot of great statements that he makes in there. But one that hit me, he was talking about 1 Peter 5. And he was saying that pastors oftentimes can be like middle school or high school girls that just want to complain all the time. And he's true. We can be very whiny, complainy people to God about the people that he's given us. So-and-so doesn't want to do this. So-and-so won't do this. People won't serve. People won't do this. And he said, you know what we're not told to do as pastors is to complain to God about the people he's given us. And he went on to encourage pastors not to sit there and complain to God about the flock that he has called you to under shepherd, to shepherd, but instead be thankful that God would even allow you to shepherd some of his people. Like we sit here and we somehow feel like we're entitled to all this, when we have to step back too and say, wait a second, I should just be thankful that God has even allowed us to be in this position to do this. We should be thankful that God would even use us to do something for him, that God would even use us to make an impact for the kingdom, to share his word, to share his gospel with people, to be a light in this world. There's several lessons that we can learn from this chapter. We, of course, have free will. We're able to make decisions, but we can accomplish nothing apart from God. In fact, every achievement comes from God. He is our source. God is able to deliver us from any foe or trial. It's not a matter of if he can, it's a matter of if we're being faithful and trusting him to. And if we're honest, we look at our earthly situation, we make mountains out of molehills, and we look at this problem and say, there's no way this can be solved. There's no way this can be fixed. There's no way I can get over this. There is. However, God decides to do it. That God is the one that can deliver us. We ought not make our problems here bigger than the God we serve. We should remember that God is bigger than our trials. And without God's grace daily, this would be a miserable life. That God's grace is renewed every day. His mercy is new every day. And we ought to be walking every day in the grace that God gives us. Each day is another opportunity to experience that grace, to give out that grace, and to walk in God's grace, and to be completely dependent upon him. Tomorrow is going to be a new day, filled with new challenges. Who knows what it holds? But God does. Walk in his grace, walk in his mercy, and watch what God may do through you. It'd be amazing to see what he can do. We're going to pray and then go into our time of prayer together. Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for these many lessons that we can learn from Saul, from the nation of Israel here. I do thank you that you give us grace and mercy every day and that they are new each and every day.